I wanted to ask you some questions about like the hacking community and
Sure.
like, how it's grown over time. And me I feel like I'm like the, what's it called? The baby boomer or whatever.
Baby
the
boomer.
Millennial or whatever.
New kid on the block.
I feel like I'm a millennial in the hacking community where I'm coming into the industry and we've got Coalcast out, we got Icebreaker and all these tools when y'all didn't even have like Exploit DB when you were out. So it's like somebody coming from like what's that? I'm me and analogies. Coming from like using like and talking to somebody who's on Atari.
Right.
Coming from the Atari.
Right.
I'm going to say no to that analogy because the Wii is like a 10-year-old console at this point.
I know. Well, I don't know Nintendo's new stuff. I probably should have said like, I don't know. I'm a PC gamer.
The Switch.
Whatever.
See, Luke knows the
Xbox.
Switch.
I'm supposed to be the old guy here.
Oh
Come
my
on
God.
now.
I don't use consoles. I'm a PC master race. Goodness gracious. PC master race. Shout out. So like coming from like DEF CON 7, you know what I mean?
6 was my first, yeah.
Okay, 6.
7 was the first time I worked staff.
Okay.
Now we're at 26, 27 something.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think so. I don't know. I need to
20-something
go.
years.
What were some of the changes in culture that you've seen?
Yeah.
Because it's funny. Because like I know that talking to a lot of old schoolers or whatever, there's a big thing with like OPSEC and like being private, not knowing people, letting people know who you are, using handles. And then now we've got Bug Crowd. And there was even like a big thing on Twitter where there was like a hacking ranking system that came out that was all the buzz. You know what I'm saying? You're laughing.
Yeah, the clout meter that they established. Yeah.
So like, what are some of the changes that you've seen over time, and like maybe what are some changes that you could probably live without?
I think it's a great question, and I'm going to kind of play it on the timeline of when I went to DEF CON 6. It was the Plaza in Las Vegas, right before we made the switch over to Alexis Park. Which was a really big deal in that scene. When I went to the Plaza, I think I met and maybe got the real name of 2 people.
Wow.
At the time, DEF CON, I don't even think we'd broke 1,000 people yet. Whereas when you compare it now, it's something like 40,000.
It's packed. Caesars is totally packed.
Yeah. But it gives you an idea of kind of the crowd. But I got a lot of people's handles, and I got a lot of email addresses to visit with people. Back then, it was a rare thing for people to operate or be working in groups or in teams. Most of the time, the research that was being done, the things that were being posted, things that were being said were being done by an individual. Those days are long dead, right? When you look at the most powerful companies in the world, that are doing this work, when you look at companies like us that go in to help those companies be more secure, it's always a teaming type environment. It's always about, sharing that knowledge and information. And that's definitely a shift and a change in the way the industry does things or sees things. I think that it has a lot to do with just growing up. Again, in the infancy of this industry, it was a lot of times it really literally felt like, what can we get away with? And in the way that we do the work and the way that we scope it and the way that we would approach the different challenges and things. Nowadays, you have all these compliances and all these different requirements. You have certifications. You have teaching models. You have all these programs that people are going through to learn stuff that back then was just a scramble to try to get your hands on the information to try to learn it. Logan, you and I were talking earlier about like how access to information has changed, right?
Yeah, like No Starch Press and Sans and all these blogs that are out now.
Right. When you think about back when all this stuff was going on, people would dial into my BBS and they would upload documents that were like service manuals for telephones, payphones and stuff like this. We didn't have the internet yet. People would share information through these by dropping these different docs into different places, and people would download them and read them. And it was truly like getting a hold of a banned book or something that hadn't been in publication or print for hundreds of years, in the way that it made you feel, it was special. Nowadays, it's anyone can get a hold of exploit code. Anyone can write a buffer overflow. Anyone can go out and obtain the knowledge and information to be able to do this type of stuff.
Yeah, it's crazy how much you can find just by Googling like how to hack.
Yep.
Like back then, that was like, or back then being, just like 5 to 10 years ago, it's hard to find that type of stuff. But
Yeah.
now it's like pen testing has become so mainstream.
Yeah.
It's
And
super
we
easy.
were talking about the change that occurred back in days like that. We would meet, I would meet a friend or somebody that knew how to do basic exploit development. And again, that person was put on a pedestal that was unbelievable because it was one of those things that, the knowledge just wasn't out there. I will never forget, when you look at things like Smashing the Stack for Fun and Profit, when that came out, 2 months later, all of a sudden you see this huge rush of all these people start pushing out and publishing and talking about how they're doing these Stack Overflows and how they're, doing arbitrary code execution and running this stuff as an administrative user, because everything was admin back then. And I think that when you look at the change, that paper for me was a huge shift in what I saw coming out of the industry and what people did with that knowledge and information. Fast forward a couple of years later, and you start looking at the work that like H.D. Moore did around creating like Metasploit and putting that tool set together. Now it's commonplace where one of my favorite things to do to demonstrate ease of exploitation is that we'll go perform a test or we'll go do a hack, and we can sit down and pull a non-technical user in, someone who's janitorial staff or clerical staff, and we'll sit them down at a computer and literally step them through the process of using Metasploit to compromise, a software weakness or vulnerability that's on a host out there.
Showing someone how to do like MS 1710, like
Right.
run Eternal Blue through Metasploit. Oh my God. Yeah. I've shown that before as a demo for like how point and clickable stuff is.
Exactly. Yeah. And it makes you realize that, what people once worshipped and thought was the coolest of the neatest thing now has become very, very commonplace. And I think you're going to see that as the industry continues to change. When I look forward 5, 10, 20 years, automation, machine learning, neural distributed networking, these are the types of things that are now being used to really drive and to be a force multiplier in this industry. The days of having a single individual sit down and run a vulnerability scan and then having them spend hours of time crunching through testing SSL certificates and trying to validate all these different findings and weaknesses and, just trying to get a foothold, that is becoming trivial at this point. With the tools and the knowledge and the information that's available out there, it's more about how that impacts your company. How does it introduce risk, and what does that risk mean to your environment? Less about the fact of, oh, well, we forgot to patch this one computer and now it can be hacked.
Right. Like instead of, oh, we found 1710, I'm just going to use that again. Like on a computer, that's that's super important. Not always. Like what if 1710 is on this like you said before, like an isolated box that doesn't do anything, it doesn't have any DA creds in memory. You're not able to go dump and pivot into other stuff. Like who cares if you take over one unused box?
Yep. But in the same sense, we're seeing a change now too. Virtualization, cloud deployed environments. There's a huge push and a huge move right now. People are not doing so much work on prem at this point. As far as where the data is resting and being processed. We're seeing a lot of people move to the cloud.
Yeah,
and it's interesting because everybody's quick to adopt it, but you've got to keep those same basic rules that you've always known in check for when you're deploying the crowd. What types of things are going to be visible? What services do I want to be out there on the internet? It's the same work and the same type of stuff that we've been going after. It's just in a different look now, or a different feel now.
Yeah. I remember when S3 started really, really catching on just recently. There were a lot of people, like the Open S3 buckets thing. Like everybody was putting their stuff in S3 buckets. Nobody knew how they worked.
Yep.
So everybody was checking the box that says like, oh yeah, make it publicly readable. Of course, I want to be able to read it over the internet. And they didn't understand that meant literally anybody can go to this link and read it.
Yeah.
And if your S3 bucket's named company name /aws.amazon.com or whatever, you might be found out.
Well, and we've seen a huge push. People are adopting new technologies, Kubernetes, Docker, a lot of these types of new solutions people are quick to adopt them. They want to embrace this. They see that there's a change and a shift occurring in the industry to go that route. Problem is, once again, if you don't understand the way that it works in the back end, you may be introducing something to your environment that decreases security, not improves it. I think it was Brad, one of our guys here on the team, gave a presentation at Hexacon that was demonstrating how to escape Docker containers to take over the hosting system.
Yeah.
Amazing research, right?
Very cool.
Awesome work. Some of the people out there look at it and they go, well, who cares? You're overtaking a computer that you already own. But the bigger thing to take away from it is the fact that they're exploiting a service and getting to places in the machine and places to the location that, you're not supposed to be able to see or do.
Right. So like maybe in that one implementation, he wasn't able to do anything super interesting, but think about the concept itself. Like, how could that be applied other places?
That was my exact argument. It's like, okay, well, that's cool if I'm running that machine. What if somebody else is running that machine and I do that exploit?
Yeah,
now all of a sudden, I see all of your instances across all of your deployments.
Yeah, like what if you're a contractor that has access provisioned and you're one of 50 contractors? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's powerful, and I'm all about the adoption of technology. It's we're just going to keep doing it quicker and faster. But I do think it's important, once again, to look at that quadrant and really understand, how does this affect my people, my process, my technology, the data that we're responsible for storing and protecting, and what does that mean, if we make this shift in the change? It's part of the reason I'm proud to work where I do is that one of the big things we do with Coalfire is we advise people in how to do that right and how to do that safely. When you look at our work around FedRAMP, for instance, we've done more FedRAMP exponentially than any other company. And part of that is because we've been doing it since the start. So we understand what those environments need to look like, what needs to be in play, what kind of controls and security features are protecting that data and information. And more specifically, how people are deploying into that environment and using that environment once it's been spun up.